Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for this training session on professional behavior, how to get along in the workplace. The first thing may seem like a no-brainer to you, but it often trips up new and sometimes experienced managers and supervisors, and that is, do not touch employees. Now, touch is something that goes on in society all the time. I mean, we shake hands, we pat people on the back, we sometimes hug people's neck, the way we say it down here in the South. But those things take place in different social settings than at work. At work, we have to maintain a policy of not touching employees. Your intent doesn't matter. I want to let that sink in. It doesn't matter what you meant by touching an employee. It is the perspective of the employee that matters. The only way to be safe and to avoid causing offense is to refrain from touching employees and coworkers. Please listen to me on this one, especially if you are a new or newer supervisor or manager. Don't touch employees. In fact, this is something that I would say when I was doing training classes for managers. I would say I have 3 tips for avoiding lawsuits and avoiding problems with your employees. And so I said, make a list, 1, 2, and 3, and they would write it down. And I would say, okay, number 1, don't touch employees. And they would write it down. And then I'd say, number 2, don't touch employees. And inevitably, they would look up at me and I'd say, write it down. And they did. And then number 3, can you guess what it is? Sure enough, don't touch employees. And even after doing that little exercise to emphasize how important it was not to touch employees, somebody would not get the message, and I would have to handle a complaint from an employee that a manager, quote unquote, put their hands on me. Now, this may be a situation where a manager simply, touch their shoulder to convey sincerity, or maybe brushed up against them when they were reaching for something that was over their head or something like that. We have to be very careful about this. Even the most benign and innocent gesture that might be considered fine in another situation could be considered aggressive or inappropriately friendly or personal. You don't have to worry about it if you make it a point not to touch any employee. Of course, we're not talking about socially acceptable forms of touching. Now, I just got done saying that you don't know how people are going to take things. Well, there are some things that we know are going to be acceptable. For example, shaking hands. If I extended my hand to somebody, shaking hands is by no stretch of the imagination an aggressive thing or a sexually charged kind of an action. So you don't have to worry about something that is socially acceptable like that. But we do have to be careful about things that we may do in a casual social setting that would not be appropriate at work, like hugging, for example. Now, hugging seems like a really friendly, nice thing, and we want to have a friendly atmosphere here. We want to be casual. We want to be friends. We want to get along. No, that's not the place for hugging. And the reason for that is a hug between 2 people in a social setting may be, very nice and a gesture of warmth and stuff. But in the workplace, if you have a supervisor hugging a subordinate, that subordinate may feel like they don't have a choice. And you know what they may claim? Sexual harassment. So we don't want to get involved in that sort of thing. Don't touch employees. Number 2, I know that you want to have fun at work, and we like to cut up sometimes and tell a joke and laugh to kind of relieve some of the tedium, the boredom, sometimes the monotony of work. Because sometimes work gets that way. When I'm filling out an Excel spreadsheet, I'm not saying woohoo, I'm having so much fun. Sometimes work is work. So we have to ensure that when we are joking, that we do not cover things that are protected or sensitive issues for employees. Now, let me cover this for you. And you may not even be aware that some of these things are covered by the law. For example, let's say you made a joke about a man or a woman, okay, about the gender. What law would cover that? That's Title VII. Because we are not permitted to discriminate on the basis of, in part, gender. How about a joke, which obviously would be in bad taste, regarding color or nationality? Again, Title VII. Ethnicity, same thing, Title VII. How about physical characteristics? Okay, maybe somebody has, some sort of a physical characteristic, and it becomes the brunt of a particular joke. Maybe the way they walk, or maybe their eyes may be bad, or something along those lines. And somebody comes up and pops a joke about this physical characteristic. What law would cover that? Well, Title VII would be one of them. And then the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, and the ADA-AA, which is the American with Disabilities Act Amendment Act, which vastly expanded the things that are covered under the ADA. You're getting the idea now, right? That joking, as long as it is very, very narrowly confined, can be nice. And you know what I'm talking about, okay? We're not going to talk about people. We're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about color of people's skin or gender and those sorts of things. Now, I want you to understand this too. You may be rolling your eyes and saying, well, come on, we can joke. I mean, nobody here takes offense. Well, think about that. You think that nobody's taking offense, but if you're a supervisor or a manager and you pop off a joke and 10 people are laughing, do you think that one person who is offended is going to sit there with their arms crossed and in front of everybody say, hey, I don't like that? No, it would be embarrassing to them, but they could take offense. Another situation is you and somebody else could be completely fine with what you're talking about, but somebody overhears and takes offense. What I'm trying to do here is to position you to be in a completely safe, defensible kind of a position at work. And that is, if you don't enter into these joking situations, that you're going to be safe. Or if you do, make sure that the joke is not in the least bit offensive to anybody, nor could it be offensive to anybody. The fact is, we live in a very litigious society where many people are sensitive to remarks that could be taken as insensitive towards any protected class. Not too long ago in the news, the Southern flag was being brought up and discussed, and some people took a great deal of offense to that flag. And we had some, states that were removing the flag from their capitals and so on. Wherever you fall on that position, let me ask this question: is it possible for somebody to be offended by that symbol? And the answer is yes. Yes, somebody could be offended by that symbol. So if you were, and I'm not talking about flying a flag in your front yard or something like that. I'm talking about at work. If you bring up that discussion and you fall on one side or another of the issue at work as a supervisor, can you see where somebody may feel like maybe you have a certain opinion towards them that may put them in a discrimination kind of situation? I'm just giving a word to the wise here. You have to be sensitive and careful about what you say as a leader. I've always been one to open my mouth and insert my foot, and so I know what I'm talking about here. Sometimes it is very wise just to keep your mouth shut. Just don't say it. You may want to say something that's funny. You may see a chance to say something sarcastic. Don't enter into it, and you won't have to worry about the reactions of people. Keep work about work, and you will find that you have a much easier time, and your people will appreciate the fact that you do that. Now, the downside of that is you can't be this good time person. You're not going to be life of the party. Okay, that's part of being a leader. You're not there to be the life of the party. You're there to make sure that people have a safe, fair, and equitable workplace. And by following these things, you're going to see that that becomes much easier. The third thing we're going to talk about is non-work related comments. And you see in front of you a picture of what came out, I think this was in the late 70s, is when these no-name kind of labels started to become popular. And the idea was that you could save money on generic brands because they didn't spend all that money with the color prints and the designs and all of that kind of stuff. So these things came out. Well, the reason why I put a picture of these up is because we want to keep our comments just like these generic cans. We want them to be work-related. We want them to be about business. We want them to be fair and equitable. And you know what? I kind of term it being a nerd. You're going to be a nerd at work. Just accept it. You're going to be a nerd at work. You're going to follow the rules. You're going to make sure that everyone's treated fairly. You're going to make sure that you do things the way they're supposed to be done. You are not going to walk past a problem and brush it under the rug. You're going to be the one that stands up and says, hey, we can't do that. And a lot of people look at that as being a nerd. Well, that's part of it. That's part of your leadership, that you take that responsibility, that you will not accept questionable behavior. You will not accept racy or discriminatory kind of joking or talk. You are the one that's going to have to stand in the gap there. What are some things that we want to avoid in the workplace? What are some potential problem areas? Well, at the time of this recording, we are looking at presidential elections, and those things can really polarize a crowd. People feel very strongly about the issues, and we should all enter in and do our civic responsibility and make sure that our voices are heard. But at work, let's be about work. That's not the place to decide who the candidates are going to be and who's going to be elected. We want to make sure that at work, we're concentrating on work and we're not causing offense to people. Some of the other things, religion. When we talk about religion at work, it can cause people to take offense if they don't hold the same kind of a view. Is there a place to talk about our faith? Absolutely. Now, in the workplace, we want to make sure that our comments are not offensive to others. And that goes on both sides, whether you are promoting your faith or if you are standing against a faith. Once again, this is work. So at work, let's concentrate on work. What are some other things that we could talk about? Well, we talked about flags. Flags have been in the news. Social issues, certain legislation that has come about. All these things are distractors to doing what we're supposed to do at work, and that is to simply concentrate on work and get our jobs done. Keep your comments generic. Now, inevitably, you're going to say something, and you may say it inadvertently, but it causes offense to somebody, and you see it. You see it right away. You see their eyes go down. You may see them fold their arms, or they may come to you and say, hey, you know what? That was kind of harsh. I took offense to that. What do you do? Now, I've seen people fall on both sides of this. One route to handle is saying, oh, man, you're too sensitive. I mean, lots of people say blah, blah, blah. Lots of people have opinion of blah, blah, blah. I'm not the only one, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to apologize for saying blah, blah, blah. Do you see where I'm going with this? The person pushes a bad hand. That's what I call it, pushing a bad hand. You caused offense. The question is not whether or not the person deserved to be offended. The question is, now that they are offended, what are you going to do? And you see on your screen what we should do. Hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. I won't do that again. It is amazing the respect that you can gain by simply owning up to something and saying, I'm sorry, I caused you offense. I certainly didn't intend it that way, but I've learned something and I will not do it again. I'm sorry. Now let's talk about complaints. Some people look at complaints as a hassle. They look at them as a cloud on an otherwise sunny day, and complaints are actually just the opposite. A complaint is actually your employee doing you a favor. Why do I say that? Because complaints allow you to identify things that may have caused offense or problems at a low level that you can handle before they spiral out of control and result in a lawsuit or an EEOC complaint or something along those lines. So when an employee complains, listen. Listen to what they say. Give them your full attention. Look into the issue. Don't try to sidestep a complaint. And you know, there are some employees that seem to complain more than others. And I'm sure that there's somebody popping into your mind right now. Well, when they complain, listen to them. They may be the sounding board for your workforce. They may be the ones that will tell you something that would just continue to fester and become a bigger problem had they not brought it to your attention. So listen to complaints. It is a lot easier to put out a campfire than it is to put out a forest fire. So let's handle things at their lowest level. If you don't know how to handle a particular situation, a particular complaint, if it's kind of gone beyond your depth, give your regional HR manager a call, and they would be happy to give you some counsel and to help you through that situation while maintaining a minimum amount of exposure to liability and so on. What we put up in our workspace is important. It is easy to cause offense by the things that we post, screensavers that we use on our computers or our phones, different jokes, maybe little clippings that we have up, or even things that we view while we're at work. It is never appropriate to display items in your workplace that could be offensive. Work is not the place to make your political statement or stand on social issues. As a supervisor, work is a place to accomplish the goals of your company and develop your team. Now, you might also want to be careful about the things you post on social media. Why is that? Because it is easily accessible, and you may be accused of something and you deny it, and maybe it absolutely was not true, but then they bring up your social media, and the social media tends to show that you really did think that way. You really did have an opinion that way. It would be very hard to defend against something like that. So let's make sure that even on social media that we're careful about what we post so that we don't cause offense. It's never appropriate to make sexual references, innuendos, jokes, or comments at work. This is a fast track to a ruined career. You have to be careful when joking, because somehow it seems that when jokes are being told, they always seem to take a left turn into those double meanings, getting risque and downright obscene. Don't walk the fence on this issue. Stop coarse joking when you hear it. As a supervisor, it's your responsibility to protect your employees from harassment when you know it's happening. Don't allow anything, because something that may seem funny to you could be very offensive to someone else. Now look, just in the spirit of honesty, I've been married now for 23 years, and some of the funniest jokes that I've heard, away from work, some of the funniest jokes I've heard have to do with marriage situations, but they are not appropriate in the workplace. So those things don't need to be at work where somebody could take offense. Remember, there's a dynamic here. When you're in a social situation away from work, people can listen, they don't have to listen, but there's no power there. Everyone is an equal there. But in the work setting, you're a supervisor and other people are employees. Now there is a power in play here, a power of providing or denying benefits, the power of granting or denying even employment. So that dynamic means that we have to make sure that we present a fair and equitable leadership style to everyone. Along this line, I have to talk to you new supervisors and new managers. When you get into your new role, it may be that you were palling around with some of the people that you now supervise. You have to be very careful about that. Well, why? Can't I be friends? You can be friends, yeah. But let me ask you this. Let's say that all of your friends are blue. They have blue skin, all right? And some other people that are not necessarily your buddies have orange skin and yellow skin and purple skin. Now, those people are going to look at you and say, wow, he pals around those people with blue skin, but, the color of my skin may be the reason why he doesn't want to pal around with me. Once again, you're a supervisor. You do not have the luxury of playing favorites. And a simple thing like palling around or going out after work or something like that could be perceived as favoritism, and negatively, it could be viewed as being discriminatory to the people that you don't pal around with. Something to think about. Never ever view pornography at work. This seems like a very obvious thing, but I have to say it. I've actually had situations where people have asked me, what, you mean like on my break or at lunchtime? I can't get on my phone and view pornography? No. The answer is no, you cannot. Why? When you're looking at pornography, whatever that pornography is, if somebody sees that, do you think that they could feel that you may possibly objectify that particular gender that you're looking at? Is it possible for them to think that you may have certain opinions that could influence the way that you treat them in the workplace? Is it possible that somebody could feel offended and be sexually offended by the things that now they are forced to see? It seems like a no-brainer, but I'm just going to make it absolutely plain. Do not view pornography at work. This would go as far as not putting up things in your work area, risque calendars, putting up sexually charged jokes like clippings and that sort of thing, playing cards that might have, nude pictures on them. Different things like that are just very, very bad to have in the workplace, and they will almost certainly cause somebody offense. A lot of people have asked me, well, I'm a supervisor. Now this person, they asked me a question. I was just answering the question. So why are you coming down on me? Well, you know what? You have choices. When somebody brings up a topic that you know is going to be a polarizing topic, it's going to have people on both sides feeling very strongly, excuse yourself from that situation. I listened to a leadership teacher by the name of Glenn Shepard, and he came up with this really great resolution to an employee who says, well, why do I have to do it? And his answer from Glenn Shepard, why do I have to do it, is not because I told you to, not because I'm your supervisor and you've got to do it or you're going to be fired. It is, that is not an appropriate question. That's not an appropriate question. You don't get to ask that question. I thought that was brilliant. That was fantastic. Before I listened to Glenn Shepard, my little girl, and this is, oh goodness, this is a long time ago because now she's in her 20s, but she would come out and I'd say, hey, Becky, you need to go ahead and clean your room. And she'd say, but I don't want to clean my room. And I'd look at her, and this is when she's, much younger. I'd say, that's the great thing about it. You don't have to want to. The whole time you're cleaning your room, you don't have to want to. And she'd kind of shuffle off. She didn't really have an answer to that one. But the point that I'm getting to here is this. When somebody asks you a question, like a classic one, especially right now because of the election going on, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to vote for? Well, that is a charged question. So you simply excuse yourself from the situation. Say, hey, I've got my opinions. I'm not going to talk about them here at work. Let's go ahead and get busy. You just excuse yourself. You get out of that situation. What do you think about interracial couples? We're not going to talk about that. We've got work to do. All right. What do you think about gay marriage? What do you think about, this particular flag? What do you think about this particular group? No, we're not going to talk about that. You're the leader. You take charge and you say, yes, I will, or no, I will not talk about this. And by the way, if your employees are standing around and they've got time to talk about social issues, do you think maybe it might be time to say, hey, let's get to work. If you don't have anything to do, I'll find something. That is a wonderful way to respond to this too. If people are getting chatty, if people are starting to have time to talk, find them something to do. Find some floorboards that need scrubbing. Find a floor that needs to be mopped. Find an extra task. Find a storeroom that needs to get cleaned up. And you will find that your employees wise up very quickly that they don't want to be standing around because you will find something for them to do. And the best thing they could do is just be about their jobs. So just excuse yourself from topics that you know are going to be polarized, are going to be charged emotionally, and are going to be covering social issues that you simply do not want to get into. Now, what happens if you are offended by what somebody says, or you have an employee come to you and say, hey, you know what, so and so said such and such, and it really bothers me. It's really offensive. Well, here's where I'm going to tell you how to approach this. First of all, if you are comfortable, and if you're going to talk to an employee about this, you need to say this. This is the caveat, and it's a big one. If you are comfortable doing so, confront the person. Now, what does confront mean? It does not mean that we cuss them out. That is not the kind of confrontation we're talking about. Confronting is respectful, it's tactful, it's done in private, and this is where you go to the employee and you say, hey, I know you probably didn't mean it this way, but when you said such and such, it really offended me. And frankly, I just appreciate it if you wouldn't say that again. That kind of forthright and honest approach to an offensive situation is the best way to get down to the root of things. Now, the employee who said whatever was offensive is going to have a variety of responses, but that employee who was offended has done the right thing. Now, the reaction of the employee who said whatever it was, the ball's in their court. Now, they may say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I said something to offend you. And it's done, it's over. And in fact, their relationship will probably be stronger for it. Or they might say, get over it, get tough. It's a big bad world out there. Well, now that employee comes back to you and says, hey, I did what you said. This is what they said. I'm turning it over to you. Now you step in and you take action as the supervisor and do what's necessary. I mean, you may have a word to the wise may be sufficient when you go to them and they realize, oh, hey, my supervisor, my manager's talking to me about this. I better take heed. Or they may, buck up against you. And if they do, let's get it in writing. Let's give them a verbal warning in writing. Or if it's severe, we may take the action of giving them a written warning or a final warning, or even termination, depending on how severe the situation is. You may wonder about where to fall on this issue. And once again, I want to encourage you to get on the line to your regional HR manager, call your Lions HR rep, and we'll be happy to talk you through that. Each situation, by the way, is different. There's no pat answer. I know you may be wishing that I would say, hey, this is what you do in every single situation. But the truth is, no two situations are the same. So we're going to have to work through them one by one. I want you to know that you can be personally liable for inappropriate behavior at work. And this goes to saying things that are racially offensive, things that demean a person on the basis of a disability, on the basis of sexual harassment. Point is that you personally can be sued. Not just the company, you. So we need to be careful about what we say and make sure that our actions are defensible. And one of the things about having this relationship with Lions HR is that we are going to guide you in the safest possible route for both you and your company. And we are going to maintain fairness and equity for your employees. That's what HR does. We look at both sides and we come up with solutions that are going to have the best possible result. You cannot eliminate all liability. Let's face it, people sue for really ridiculous things these days. They sue at the drop of a hat. So that's all the more reason that the things that we do know are sources of lawsuits, that we take care of those things at the lowest level. But you can personally be held liable, so it's something serious. Please consider your comments before you make them. Remaining quiet is usually the best alternative to speaking when you're unsure about how the recipient is going to react. There's been times where I thought, oh man, this is a great chance for this particular comment. And then I think about it and I think, no, I'm not going to say this right now because number one, I'm at work. It is not so important that I, make 3 people laugh and cause offense to one person. I'm not going to do that. So keeping quiet is often the best course of action. Or if you hear something and look, you're smart people. You know when things are getting risque. You know when things are getting offensive or potentially offensive. Shut it down. Shut it down right then and there. Become that manager that is known as no nonsense, get your work done, come in, work, go home, and everybody's treated fairly, and you will have a productive career. Your upbringing, experience, and treatment is not an excuse for unprofessional behavior. So in other words, that excuse, well, when I was growing up, no, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter when you were growing up. Doesn't matter how your mom or dad taught you. It doesn't matter the experiences that you've had. As a leader, once again, there's that dynamic. You have power. As a leader, you have to be sensitive to the people that are your subordinates because you are the one with power. That's how the law looks at it. So are you saying isn't that unfair? Maybe, but that's how it is. That's how it is. You have to be sensitive to their needs. It's not about you, it's about them. So when it comes to the things that we say, let's say there's a slang term that you've always used. Now you know that it's maybe it's insulting to a particular ethnicity. But you've always said this. Nobody's ever said anything before. No matter, you don't use it, not in the workplace. It's your responsibility, and we've said this before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's your responsibility as a leader to stop unprofessional behavior when you see it. Do not walk past a problem. That means you're going to be a killjoy sometimes. You're going to be the one that kind of throws a wet blanket on the fire. You may even think that something that is being talked about is completely okay, but as a leader that somebody else could, even if they misunderstood, but could take offense to this. Stop it. Stop it right there and then. Remember why you're there. At work, you're at work to work, not to have jokey time, not to talk about social issues and who's going to win the election and those sorts of things. That's not the place for it. Work is about work, so let's keep things between the yellow lines on that way. I was only kidding. Boy, a lot of people have said a lot of things, and then they put that little caveat on there, I was only kidding, and they think that is the big excuse for unprofessional conduct, and it is not. I was only kidding is not an excuse. So be careful about what you say. You can't take it back once it's out there. So sometimes it's a better part of wisdom to just not say something and not have to worry about it than to say something and then worry about how people are going to take it. Avoid slang terms. What is completely okay to you or has become completely okay to you may be very offensive to somebody else. You have to measure your words. Consider where you live. Consider the history of where you are, and then think about what you are saying. People may be very sensitive to certain things, and if you put yourself just for a moment in their shoes and look at the workplace the way they do, and considering their history, you may see things in a very different light. So let's make sure. And by the way, if you're treating people equitably, if you're talking professional, this is nothing to worry about, because you're going to sleep well at night because you know that you're treating everybody fairly and your conduct and your speech is professional at work. There is always a good and a bad side to conversation. And then there's this line right in between. It's called the borderline conversation, where it's good, but it's edging over towards bad. It's right in between there. Stay away from borderline behavior. Stay away from borderline conversation. Stay away from borderline joking. Why? Because you're getting closer and closer to causing offense to somebody and bringing out all kinds of problems because a person is now offended based on a protected trait. That's why the law is there, so that people are not offended, so that people are treated fairly, and so that we can get our work done in a fair and equitable kind of environment. So please stay away from borderline joking or conversation. One of the precursors to outright discrimination is generalizing the traits of groups of people. We've all done it. I don't know of anyone who has not done it. And you want to know why we generalize? It's easy. It's easy. If we look at a group of people and say, well, they're all like this. Now, you know good and well that a whole group of people is not going to be all like a particular characteristic. Ain't going to be that way. But it's so much easier for us if we don't have to think about it. We don't have to take people on a case-by-case basis and have people be measured by, the quality and quantity of the work. If we just lump them all together, then we don't have to think about it. But we cannot and we will not do that. So do not generalize. And if you look at the news, you can see groups of people right now that are being grouped together and corporately are being looked down upon by society. As a supervisor and a manager, you cannot do that. Your employees are measured by their actions. They are measured by the quality and quantity of their work, by their ability to adhere to the company standards, and that is all. That's what we measure our employees by. The final point I'm going to make is not to ask inappropriate questions. And this is something you would think would be pretty benign, pretty straightforward. Let's say you had a question about some religious garb that somebody was wearing, some sort of piece of religious clothing that they were wearing, and you ask about it. We don't want to do that because we don't want a person to have to explain themselves, whereas somebody else does not have to explain themselves. Do you see what I'm saying? Why are we going to single out one person and say, hey, I want you to tell me why you do such and such, and we don't ask anyone else? Do you see? Why would I do that? Why would I want to be singled out and have to give a defense for why I am practicing my particular beliefs? Or why would I have to give a medical description of why I have a limp, or why I have a certain kind of accommodation, that sort of thing? We have to be careful about that. Be careful about the questions that you ask. Now, there's some things that are just outright rude. Asking what a person's size is, or the kind of clothing that they wear, I mean, what does that have to do with work? Absolutely nothing. So you want to be careful about the questions that you ask. Again, if as a supervisor you heed the advice of this training and you simply keep things about work, that you avoid borderline joking, if you keep about the business of your company, you're not going to have time to be talking about, inappropriate things. You're going to be busy working. You're going to be treating people with respect. You're going to be measuring your employees by the quality and quantity of their work and how well they adhere to your company standards. And that's where we want to be as supervisors and managers. There's no place for the buddy system. There's no place for racial discrimination. There's no place for sexual harassment in the workplace. So I hope that you will take this training to heart. It will help you in your career. It will save you countless headaches and heartburn by simply treating your people respectfully and being a professional at all times. Thank you for joining me. If you have any further questions, please contact your Lions HR Regional HR Manager. Have a great day.